Before numbers shaped our buildings and stars guided our journeys, before healers understood the body's secrets, there were minds at work. Many of these ancient thinkers, observers, and innovators walked paths less traveled, dedicating their lives with a singular, often solitary intensity. Imagine a world unfolding its mysteries to those who had the unwavering time and focus to listen. Their stories are not just about discoveries, but about the unique lives that made them possible. Number 10. Visionary engineers. Undivided attention to monumental constructions. The ancient world is dotted with marvels of engineering, structures so grand they defy belief even today. Think of the colossal pyramids, the intricate aqueducts, the sprawling cities. Building these required not just labor, but immense intellectual effort, planning, and sustained focus from the master builders and engineers. Often, the sheer scale and decades-long commitment to such projects suggests lives dedicated with an intensity that might have been supported by a singular, less domestically encumbered existence. These individuals poured their entire being into calculations, material sourcing, labor management, and problem-solving on an epic scale. Their legacy is written in stone and water, testaments to a profound dedication. Consider the Roman aqueducts, like the Aqua Appia, built around 312 before Common Era, stretching for over 16 kilometers, mostly underground. Or the Pont du Gard in France, part of a 50-kilometer system, with arches reaching nearly 49 meters high, constructed in the 1st century Common Era. The precision required was astonishing. For instance, the main channel of the Pont du Gard has a gradient of only 1 in 3,000, meaning it drops just 17 meters over its entire 50-kilometer length. This level of accuracy across such distances demanded meticulous surveying, planning, and unwavering oversight, often over many years, sometimes generations of engineers, while the names of many individual engineers are lost to time. The scale of their undertakings speaks volumes. A figure often associated with Roman engineering is Vitruvius, who wrote De Architectura in the late 1st century before Common Era. His 10 books cover everything from town planning and building materials to hydraulics, clocks, and machines. While Vitruvius's personal life details, including marital status, are not extensively documented, his encyclopedic work itself represents a lifetime of observation, study, and compilation. He describes the ideal education of an architect as encompassing geometry, optics, history, philosophy, music, medicine, law, and astronomy. Achieving such breadth of knowledge and codifying it would require immense, focused dedication. He discusses the importance of proportion and symmetry, principles derived from the human body and applied to temples and public buildings. His writings became a foundational text for architects for centuries. Commitment to produce such a comprehensive treatise suggests a life where intellectual pursuits held paramount importance. The insights he provided, for example, on acoustics in theaters or the proper mixing of concrete, were practical and revolutionary. Then there is the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient analog computer discovered in a shipwreck dating from around 100 before Common Era. This intricate device, with its complex system of at least 30 bronze gears, was used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses decades in advance. The genius required to design and construct such a sophisticated mechanism is staggering. The identities of its creators are unknown, but the level of astronomical and mathematical knowledge combined with the mechanical skill points to a workshop or school of thinkers deeply immersed in their craft. Such an endeavor would have required years, perhaps decades, of focused, calibrated, or individual effort, free from many daily distractions. Precision of the gears, some with teeth barely a millimeter long, shows an almost obsessive attention to detail. This device was not a product of casual tinkering. It was the result of profound, sustained intellectual labor. Commitment to understanding the cosmos and rendering it in mechanical form implies a life, or lives profoundly dedicated to this singular complex task. The Antikythera mechanism remained unparalleled in its complexity for over 1,000 years. The minds behind it were undoubtedly consumed by their quest, channeling their energies into this extraordinary piece of engineering. Number 9. Early mathematicians. Abstract, worlds born from intense concentration. Mathematics, the language of the universe, blossomed in ancient times through the efforts of individuals who dedicated themselves to the world of numbers, shapes, and patterns. This pursuit often required deep, prolonged concentration, a mental space cleared for abstract thought. While not always a deliberate choice of celibacy for intellectual reasons, the intense focus needed for groundbreaking mathematical work often aligned with lifestyles less encumbered by the demands of a large family or extensive social obligations. These thinkers charted territories of pure logic, laying foundations that underpin science and technology to this day. Euclid of Alexandria, who lived around 300 before Common Era, is famously known as the father of geometry. His work, Elements, is one of the most influential works in the history of mathematics, serving as the main textbook for teaching mathematics, especially geometry, from the time of its publication until the late 19th or early 20th century. Elements consists of 13 books, systematically presenting definitions, postulates, propositions, and proofs. The sheer intellectual labor involved in compiling, organizing, and rigorously proving this vast body of knowledge is immense. Details of Euclid's personal life are scarce, with no definitive records of his marital status. However, the monumental nature of his work suggests a life profoundly dedicated to scholarship. He took the existing mathematical knowledge of his time, refined it, and presented it in a logical, coherent framework. For instance, his fifth postulate, the parallel postulate, sparked a debate and research for over 2 millennia. The ability to create such a lasting and foundational work implies a singular devotion to the discipline. Then there is Archimedes of Syracuse, who lived from approximately 287 to 212 before Common Era. He was a brilliant mathematician, physicist, engineer, inventor, and astronomer. His contributions are legendary. He derived an accurate approximation of pi, defined and investigated the spiral bearing his name, and created formulas for the volumes of surfaces of revolution. He is also known for his work on levers, famously stating, "Give me a place to stand, and I will move the earth." During the siege of Syracuse, his war machines were said to have held the Roman forces at bay. While some stories about his life may be embellished, his profound immersion in his work is a recurring theme. Plutarch wrote that Archimedes would often forget his food and neglect his person, so consumed was he by his diagrams and calculations. He was reportedly killed by a Roman soldier while contemplating a mathematical diagram. Whether he married or had children is not clearly recorded, but his life appears to have been one of intense intellectual absorption. His work on hydrostatics, leading to the principle of buoyancy, supposedly discovered during a bath, demonstrates his constant state of inquiry. The dedication required for such diverse and profound discoveries points to a mind largely untethered by everyday concerns, free to wander in the realms of abstract thought and practical application. In ancient India, mathematical traditions also flourished. The Baudhayana Shulba Sutra, dating from around 800 before Common Era, contains geometric constructions and an early statement of what is now known as the Pythagorean theorem. These texts were often part of Vedic literature, composed and preserved by priestly scholars who dedicated their lives to ritual and learning. The Shulba Sutras provided rules for constructing altars of specific shapes and sizes, requiring precise geometric knowledge. Individuals who developed these mathematical principles were deeply embedded in a tradition of scholarship and religious practice that often prioritized study and ritual over more conventional family lives. Their work demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of geometry and number theory long before similar developments in other parts of the world. For example, they provided approximations for the square root of 2 accurate to several decimal places. This kind of intellectual pursuit, integrated into a life of spiritual discipline and scholarly community, allowed for sustained focus on complex problems. The dedication of these ancient Indian mathematicians laid groundwork for later developments in algebra and trigonometry. Number 8. Pioneer healers. Singular devotion to understanding the body. Quest to understand and heal the human body is an ancient one. In early societies, healers often occupied unique positions, sometimes set apart from the community, allowing them to dedicate themselves entirely to the study of illness, remedies, and the intricate workings of life. This singular devotion, whether by choice or societal expectation, could provide the uninterrupted time needed for observation, experimentation with herbs, and the accumulation of medical knowledge passed down through generations or discovered anew. These pioneers, often living lives distinct from the norm, laid the very first stones on the path to modern medicine. Consider the figure of Imhotep in ancient Egypt, who lived around the 27th century before Common Era during the Third Dynasty. While famed as the architect of the Djoser Pyramid, he was also a renowned physician. Centuries after his death, he was deified as a god of medicine and healing. While details of his personal life are not fully known, his elevation to divine status in medicine suggests a profound impact and dedication in this field. Egyptian medicine is evidenced by texts like the Edwin Smith Papyrus and the Ebers Papyrus from around 1600–1500 before Common Era, was remarkably advanced for its time. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, for example, is an ancient textbook on trauma surgery, describing 48 cases of injuries, fractures, wounds, dislocations, and tumors. Presents a rational scientific approach to medicine, detailing examination, diagnosis, treatment, and prognosis for each case. The individuals who authored and contributed to such texts were likely priest-physicians, part of a scholarly tradition that required intense study and practice. Their lives within temple complexes, dedicated to learning and healing, would have facilitated this focused work. In ancient Greece, the cult of Asclepius, the god of healing, involved temples known as Asclepians, which were centers of medical advice, prognosis, and healing. Priests in these temples played a crucial role. While not all were necessarily celibate, the dedication to the temple and its practices would have been a primary life focus. Patients would undergo incubation, sleeping in the temple with the hope of receiving a dream from the god offering a cure. Priests would then interpret these dreams and prescribe treatments, which could include dietary regimens, exercises, or herbal remedies. The systematic collection of case histories and observations within these centers contributed to a growing body of medical knowledge. Hippocrates, of course, who lived around 460 to 370 before Common Era, is considered the father of Western medicine. The Hippocratic Corpus, a collection of around 70 early medical works from ancient Greece, is associated with his name. These texts emphasize observation, rational explanation, and ethical practice. While Hippocrates himself likely married and had children who followed him into medicine, the school of thought he represents valued rigorous dedication to the art and science of healing. Some philosophers and physicians in the ancient world chose lives of simplicity and focused study, believing it enhanced their ability to understand nature and the human condition. Further east, in ancient China, traditional medicine was developing its own rich system. Figures like Bianque, who legendarily lived around the 5th century before Common Era, were renowned for their diagnostic skills, including pulse taking. Stories depict him as a wandering physician, honing his skills through observation and practice. While historical details are debated, the archetype of the dedicated traveling healer who forgoes a settled life for the pursuit of medical knowledge is a recurring one. The Hongdi Neijing, or Inner Canyon of the Yellow Emperor, compiled between the 3rd century before Common Era and the 1st century Common Era, is a foundational text of Chinese medicine. It covers theories of yin and yang, the 5 elements, meridians, and acupuncture. The scholars who compiled and refined such comprehensive texts over centuries were engaged in a profound intellectual endeavor. Their commitment to systematizing medical knowledge, often within scholarly or monastic-like settings, required immense focus. The development of acupuncture, for instance, with its intricate mapping of points and channels in the body, could only have arisen from meticulous observation and practice over long periods, by individuals deeply immersed in this specific form of healing. Their lives, centered on understanding the flow of qi and its relation to health, fostered a unique path of discovery. Number 7. Master Artisans. Solitary refinement of revolutionary crafts. Ancient breakthroughs were not limited to philosophy and grand constructions. They also occurred in the workshops of master artisans. The development of new materials like glass, the perfection of metallurgical techniques, or the creation of incredibly fine ceramics often required years, even decades, of experimentation, failure, and incremental improvement. This intense, often secretive dedication to a craft could be all-consuming, with some artisans dedicating their entire lives to the mastery and advancement of their specific skill. Their workshops became laboratories, and their focused, sometimes solitary efforts led to innovations that transformed daily life and industry. The invention of glassblowing, for example, around the 1st century before Common Era, likely in the Syro-Palestinian region, revolutionized glass production. Before this, glass-making was a laborious process, producing small luxury items. Glass-blowing allowed for faster production of a wider variety of vessel shapes. Imagine the artisan, or group of artisans, who first experimented with inflating molten glass with a pipe. This would have required countless hours of trial and error, working with intense heat and a volatile material. The knowledge was often closely guarded, passed down from master to apprentice. The dedication to mastering the high temperatures of the furnace, the properties of different sands and fluxes, and the delicate art of shaping the molten bubbles suggests a life deeply intertwined with the craft. While artisans often had families, the pinnacle of innovation might have been reached by those who could devote extraordinary, uninterrupted time to their experiments, perhaps living lives where the workshop was their primary world. Consider the sophistication of ancient metallurgy. The Bronze Age, beginning around 3300 before Common Era in the Near East, was defined by the ability to smelt copper and tin to create bronze, a harder and more durable metal. This was not a simple discovery. It required understanding ores, controlling furnace temperatures, requiring specialized kiln designs and fuel, and experimenting with different alloy ratios. Early metallurgists were, in a sense, practical chemists. The secrets of their trade were valuable and often kept within guilds or family lines. However, the leap from copper to bronze, and later to iron, involved periods of intense, focused experimentation. Individuals who pushed these boundaries, perhaps spending years perfecting a new smelting technique or a stronger alloy, would have been deeply immersed in their work. The Hittites, for example, were known for their early mastery of ironworking, around 1500 before Common Era. The development of techniques to carburize iron to make a form of steel was a significant step requiring meticulous control over the process. Such innovation doesn't happen by accident. It is born from relentless dedication and observation. In ancient China, the production of silk and porcelain are prime examples of crafts refined to an art form through centuries of dedicated practice. Sericulture, The cultivation of silkworms and production of silk was a closely guarded secret for millennia. The process, from raising the silkworms to reeling the delicate threads and weaving them into fabric, was intricate and labor-intensive. While often a family or community endeavor, the specialists who improved loom technology or dyeing techniques would have dedicated significant focus to their innovations. Similarly, Chinese porcelain, admired for its whiteness, strength, and translucence, was the result of a long evolution, culminating in true hard-paste porcelain around the 7th or 8th century Common Era. Quest for the perfect clay formula, kaolin and patunci, and precise firing temperatures, 1250 to 1450 degrees Celsius, involved generations of potters. The master potters who achieved these breakthroughs were artists and scientists, experimenting tirelessly. Their kilns were their laboratories. The singular pursuit of perfection in these crafts, sometimes in imperial workshops or dedicated artisan communities, fostered an environment where such profound mastery could develop, often demanding a life centered almost exclusively around the art. Number 6. Keepers of ancient lore, the undistracted scribe and librarian. Preservation and transmission of knowledge in ancient times was a monumental task, heavily reliant on the painstaking work of scribes and the careful organization of librarians. Before printing presses, every text was copied by hand, a laborious process requiring immense patience, accuracy, and dedication. Libraries such as the famed Library of Alexandria were centers of learning where scholars could access this accumulated wisdom. The individuals who performed these roles, often working in quiet seclusion within temple complexes, palaces, or dedicated scriptoria, needed a high degree of focus and commitment. Lifestyles, sometimes characterized by a singular devotion to their tasks, which might have been facilitated by not having the daily responsibilities of a large family. Scribes in ancient Egypt, for instance, held a respected position. They were essential for administration, religious rituals, and the recording of history and literature. Learning the complex hieroglyphic and hieratic scripts took many years of intensive training, often starting at a young age. Scribes would spend their days meticulously copying texts onto papyrus. Using reed pens and inks they often prepared themselves. Accuracy was paramount, especially for religious texts or official documents. A single scroll could take days or weeks to copy. This work required not just literacy, but discipline, attention to detail, and long hours of sustained concentration. While some scribes undoubtedly had families, the image of the dedicated scribe, hunched over his work, symbolizes a life devoted to the preservation of knowledge. Their contribution was not an original discovery, but in the crucial act of ensuring that knowledge survived and could be disseminated. Without their undistracted labor, much of what we know about ancient civilizations would be lost. The Library of Alexandria in Egypt, founded in the early 3rd century before Common Era, was perhaps the most famous library of the ancient world, said to have housed hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Scholars like Callimachus, a poet and scholar who worked there, undertook the enormous task of cataloging its vast collection. His Pinax, or Tables, was a 120-volume bibliographic survey of the authors whose works were held in the library. Creating such a catalog required not only immense erudition, but also a systematic approach and incredible dedication. The librarians and scholars at Alexandria were engaged in collecting, translating, editing, and preserving texts from across the known world. This intellectual ferment was supported by the Ptolemaic rulers, and the scholars often lived and worked within the museum, a research institution attached to the library. This environment, dedicated to scholarship, allowed individuals to focus intensely on their intellectual pursuits. The loss of the library, or parts of it, over time highlights the fragility of knowledge and the vital role these ancient keepers played. In Mesopotamia, Cuneiform tablets were the medium for recording everything from epic poems like Gilgamesh to astronomical observations and mathematical calculations. Scribes underwent rigorous training in adubas, or tablet houses. Complexity of cuneiform, with its hundreds of signs, demanded years of study. Archaeologists have unearthed vast archives of these clay tablets, such as the Library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh, dating to the 7th century before Common Era, which contained over 30,000 tablets and fragments. The systematic collection and organization of these texts into a library demonstrate a sophisticated approach to knowledge management. The scribes who copied these texts and the scholars who cruded them were performing a vital scientific and cultural service. Their focused work ensured the continuity of knowledge across generations. Consider the Behistun inscription, a multilingual inscription carved on a cliff face in Iran by Darius the Great around 500 before Common Era. Deciphering this was key to understanding cuneiform. The initial recording and copying of such monumental inscriptions also required skilled and dedicated individuals. Their commitment, often in service to a ruler or a temple, allowed for the creation of these lasting records. Number 5. The Lone Observer. Unfettered travel for discovery. Exploration and the collection of new information about the world were crucial for scientific advancement in ancient times. Individuals who were able to undertake long, arduous, and often dangerous journeys, free from the immediate ties and responsibilities of a settled family life, could make unique contribution. These lone observers, or leaders of small expeditions, brought back knowledge of new lands, peoples, plants, animals, and trade routes, expanding the known world and providing fresh data for scholars, cartographers, and natural philosophers. Their willingness to venture into the unknown, often driven by curiosity or a specific mission, required a singular focus and resilience. Herodotus of Halicarnassus, who lived in the 5th century before Common Era, is known as the father of history. His work, the Histories, is not just a chronicle of the Greco-Persian Wars, but also a vast ethnographic and geographical survey of the world known to the ancient Greeks. Herodotus traveled extensively, visiting Egypt, Mesopotamia, Scythia, and other regions. He meticulously recorded the customs, beliefs, history, and geography of the peoples he encountered. While the accuracy of all his accounts is debated, his method of inquiry, historia, meaning inquiry or research, was groundbreaking. His extensive travels, which would have taken years, suggest a life dedicated to this pursuit. Such journeys would have been difficult to undertake with the responsibilities of a dependent family at home. He gathered information firsthand, observing, interviewing, and collecting stories. His detailed descriptions of Egyptian mummification, the Nile's flooding, or Scythian culture provided invaluable, if sometimes colored, information to the Greek world. Another example is Zhang Qian, a Chinese official and diplomat who lived in the 2nd century before Common Era during the Han Dynasty. He was dispatched by Emperor Wu on a mission to seek an alliance with the Weshi people against the Zhenggu. His journey was incredibly arduous. He was captured by the Yongu and held captive for about 10 years. During this time, he reportedly married a Zhenggu wife and had a son. However, he eventually escaped and continued his mission, traveling through Central Asia, reaching Bactria and Sogda. Although his diplomatic mission was not entirely successful, his travels and the information he brought back to China were of immense importance. He reported on previously unknown kingdoms, their products, and their customs. His accounts opened up Chinese awareness of the lands to their west and were instrumental in the establishment of the Silk Road. His initial decade, long period of travel and captivity, far from home, represents a profound commitment to his mission, a period of singular focus on survival and eventual duty. Even if family life occurred within that context of displacement, His reports on the heavenly horses of Fergana, for example, spurred further Chinese interest in Central Asia. Pytheas of Massalia, a Greek geographer and explorer from the late 4th century before Common Era, embarked on an extraordinary voyage of exploration to northwestern Europe. He is believed to have sailed around Britain, explored Germany, and possibly reached a land called Thule, interpreted by some as Iceland or Norway. He was one of the first to describe the midnight sun, polar ice, and Germanic tribes. He also made observations about the tides and related them to the moon, a significant scientific insight. Details of his life are sparse, and his original writings are lost, known only through later, sometimes skeptical authors. However, undertaking such a long and perilous journey into largely uncharted waters would have required immense courage and dedication, and likely a life unencumbered by strong domestic ties that would prevent such an extended absence. His observations on the length of the day at different latitudes were important for early cartography and understanding the shape of the Earth. The lone navigator, pushing the boundaries of the known world, often did so because they were free, or chose to be free, from the anchors of a conventional settled life. Number 4. Philosophical orders prioritizing wisdom over worldly ties. Many ancient philosophical schools were not just places of abstract discussion, but communities where a particular way of life was practiced, often one that prioritized the pursuit of wisdom and virtue above all else. For some of these schools, or for prominent figures within them, this meant a degree of detachment from ordinary worldly affairs, including marriage and family, to allow for greater intellectual and spiritual focus. This dedicated environment fostered deep thinking and the development of complex philosophical systems that often included natural philosophy, the precursor to science. Pythagorean school, founded by Pythagoras of Samos in the 6th century before Common Era in Croton, southern Italy, is a prime example. Pythagoras is credited with many mathematical and scientific discoveries, including the Pythagorean theorem, though it was known earlier in other cultures, and theories on the numerical ratios of musical harmony. Pythagoreans lived a communal life with strict rules regarding diet, behavior, and study. Secrecy surrounded much of their teachings. While it's not definitively clear that all members were celibate, the emphasis was on a disciplined life dedicated to purification, study, and the understanding of the cosmos as an ordered, harmonious system governed by numbers. This intense, focused community life, set apart from mainstream society, allowed for deep contemplation of mathematics, music, and cosmology. They believed that the study of numbers could lead to spiritual purification and understanding the ultimate nature of reality. The dedication required by their lifestyle, including long periods of silence and study, would have been facilitated by a lessening of typical domestic distractions. Plato, who lived from approximately 428 to 348 before Common Era, founded the Academy in Athens around 387 before Common Era. It is often cited as one of the earliest institutions of higher learning in the Western world. While Plato himself did not marry, and the extent to which celibacy was a rule or expectation for students is unclear, the Academy was a place of intense intellectual activity. Scholars there pursued philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and other subjects. Plato's own dialogues explore vast philosophical territories, from metaphysics and ethics to politics and the philosophy of science. His theory of forms, for example, proposed a realm of perfect eternal archetypes that are the true reality. Developing such profound and complex ideas required immense intellectual labor and sustained contemplation. The environment of the Academy, fostering rigorous discussion and study away from the immediate pressures of civic and family life for its core dedicated members, was crucial. Aristotle, Plato's most famous student, spent 20 years at the Academy before founding his own school, the Lyceum. The dedication of these philosophers to a life of the mind, often involving a degree of asceticism or at least a prioritization of intellectual pursuits over material comforts and conventional family structures, fueled their groundbreaking contributions. In India, various philosophical schools, including branches of Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism, emphasized asceticism and renunciation as paths to enlightenment and profound understanding. Jain monks, for example, follow strict vows of non-violence, non-attachment, and celibacy. Their philosophy includes sophisticated theories of cosmology, epistemology, and the nature of matter. Buddhist monasticism, established by Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, in the 5th century before Common Era, created communities entirely dedicated to spiritual practice and study. These monasteries became centers of learning, preserving texts, and developing complex philosophical doctrines. While the primary goal was spiritual liberation, this often involved deep inquiry into the nature of mind and reality, which can be seen as a form of psychological or philosophical science. The Nalanda Mahavihara, a renowned Buddhist monastic university in ancient India, flourished for centuries, attracting scholars and students from across Asia. Curriculum included not just Buddhist philosophy, but also logic, grammar, medicine, and astronomy. The celibate life of the monks allowed for an unparalleled dedication to these scholarly pursuits, contributing to a vast body of intellectual work. Number 3. Celibate priesthoods guarding celestial knowledge. In many ancient civilizations, the study of the heavens was inextricably linked with religious practice. Priests and priestesses, often living lives set apart and sometimes involving vows of celibacy or periods of ritual purity that precluded typical family life, were frequently the first astronomers and calendar keepers. Their sacred duty to observe the sun, moon, stars, and planets was vital for agriculture, navigation, and religious festivals. This singular dedication to celestial observation, often spanning generations within temple complexes, led to remarkable astronomical insights and the development of sophisticated calendrical systems. In ancient Mesopotamia, particularly in Babylonia, astronomer priests meticulously observed the night sky from ziggurats, temple towers that provided an elevated vantage point. Starting from around the 8th century before Common Era, they kept systematic records of astronomical phenomena, such as the movements of planets, the appearances of comets, and eclipses of the sun and moon. These records, inscribed on cuneiform tablets, are some of the oldest scientific data sets we possess. The Babylonians developed sophisticated mathematical techniques to predict astronomical events, including the Saros cycle for predicting eclipses, which is a period of approximately 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. The individuals responsible for this work were often part of a hereditary or specially trained priestly class whose lives were dedicated to the temple and its associated duties, including the vital task of understanding the messages of the gods believed to be written in the sky. This long-term, focused observation, maintained over centuries, allowed them to detect subtle patterns and develop predictive models of impressive accuracy. Their work laid foundations for later Greek astronomy. In ancient Egypt, priests were also deeply involved in astronomy and calendar development. The Egyptian calendar was one of the first solar calendars, based on a year of 365 days. Its development was crucial for predicting the annual flooding of the Nile, which was the lifeblood of Egyptian agriculture. Priests observed the heliacal rising of the star Sirius, Isoptet to the Egyptians, which coincided with the approximate start of the inundation. Temple alignments were often astronomically significant, and priests were responsible for maintaining the calendar and performing rituals at astronomically determined times. The life of a priest in a major temple complex like Karnak would have involved rigorous training, adherence to purity laws, and dedication to the service of the gods and the state. This environment fostered specialized knowledge, including astronomical observation and record-keeping. The accurate measurement of time, both for daily rituals and for the yearly cycle, was a key priestly function, leading to innovations like water clocks, klepstres, and shadow clocks. The Vestal Virgins in ancient Rome, while not astronomers, represent another form of celibate religious service that involved precision and the keeping of sacred time. They were priestesses of Vesta, goddess of the hearth, and their chief duty was to maintain the sacred fire in her temple, which was never to be extinguished. They served for 30 years, during which they were sworn to chastity. While their role was primarily ritualistic, the meticulous attention to their duties and the symbolic importance of the eternal flame had connections to the continuity of the Roman state and its well-being. The Roman calendar itself underwent significant reforms, and pontiffs, priests, were initially responsible for its regulation, including the intercalation of months to keep it aligned with the solar year. The idea of a dedicated, set-apart group responsible for sacred duties that intersected with the ordering of time and societal welfare can be seen across cultures. The singular focus demanded by such roles, often lifelong or for extended periods of celibacy, allowed for an uninterrupted commitment to these vital societal and intellectual functions. Number 2. Monastic sanctuaries as hubs of innovation. Throughout the ancient world, and transitioning into later periods, monastic communities often became vital centers for the preservation of knowledge, and in some cases for new discoveries. The disciplined communal life of monks and nuns, characterized by celibacy and a detachment from many worldly concerns, provided an environment uniquely conducive to scholarship, contemplation, and focused work. These sanctuaries, whether Buddhist viharas in India, Christian monasteries in Europe and the Middle East, or other similar institutions, served as libraries, scriptoria schools, and even centers for practical experimentation in agriculture, medicine, and timekeeping. Buddhist monasteries, such as the aforementioned Nalanda in India, which flourished from the 5th century Common Era onwards, were extraordinary centers of learning. Nalanda housed thousands of monks and scholars, and its library was legendary for its vast collection of texts on a wide range of subjects. Here, Buddhist philosophy was studied with immense rigor, but so too were logic, Hechuvija, grammar, Shabdavija, medicine, Chikitsa-vija, arts and crafts, Shilpa-sthana-vija, and metaphysics, Adhyatma-vija. The celibate monks dedicated their lives to study, debate, teaching, and meditation. This intense intellectual environment fostered profound philosophical insights and contributed to developments in other fields. For example, Buddhist logicians like Dignaga and Dharmakirti, associated with Nalanda, made significant contributions to epistemology and logic that influenced thought across Asia. The systematic study of medicine within these monastic settings also preserved and advanced ancient Indian medical traditions. In the Christian tradition, particularly from the early medieval period, which builds directly on late antiquity, monasteries played a crucial role in preserving classical learning after the decline of the Western Roman Empire. Monks in scriptoria painstakingly copied ancient manuscripts, both sacred and secular, including works of Roman and Greek philosophers, scientists, and historians. Without their dedicated labor, much of this knowledge would have been lost. For instance, figures like Cassiodorus, a Roman statesman who retired to found the Vivaria monastery in southern Italy in the 6th century Common Era, explicitly directed his monks to copy and study classical texts. This work required literacy, patience, and a life structured around prayer and labor, ora et labora, which allowed for long hours of focused activity. Beyond preservation, monasteries also became centers for education and some practical innovations. Monks developed new agricultural techniques, managed extensive lands, and were involved in herbal medicine. The need to regulate the times for prayer led to advancements in timekeeping, contributing to the development of clocks. The disciplined life, free from many external distractions, allowed for this sustained intellectual and practical work. Consider the Desert Fathers and Mothers, early Christian hermits and monastics who lived in the Egyptian desert from around the 3rd century Common Era. While their primary focus was spiritual asceticism, their way of life, renouncing worldly possessions and family ties for a life of contemplation and prayer, represents an extreme form of singular dedication. Some of these figures were also known for their wisdom and practical skills. The communities that grew around them eventually developed into organized monasticism. The insights they gained into human psychology and spiritual discipline recorded in sayings and stories had a profound influence. Moreover, the practicalities of survival in harsh environments, combined with a structured community life, sometimes led to innovations in water management or craft. The core principle of monasticism, the creation of a dedicated space and lifestyle for focused spiritual and intellectual endeavor, often involving celibacy, proved to be a powerful engine for preserving and sometimes advancing knowledge through periods of great societal change. Number 1. The unwavering focus of the dedicated scholar. Hypatia and beyond. Pinnacle of ancient intellectual achievement, often stand individuals whose lives were so profoundly intertwined with their quest for knowledge that their personal narratives became inseparable from their scholarly contribution. These figures, whether by deliberate choice, societal circumstance, or simply an all-consuming passion, often lived lives characterized by an intense, unwavering focus that might have been less possible with the conventional responsibilities of marriage and family in their respective eras. Their singular dedication allowed them to push the boundaries of understanding in mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. Hypatia of Alexandria, who lived from approximately 350–370 Common Era to 415 Common Era, is one of the most famous examples of such a dedicated scholar. She was a philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician in Alexandria, Egypt, which was then part of the Eastern Roman Empire. The daughter of Phaon, himself a noted mathematician and astronomer associated with the Museum and Library of Alexandria, Hypatia received an exceptional education. She became a renowned teacher and public lecturer, attracting students from diverse backgrounds. Sources describe her as a leader of the Neoplatonist school of philosophy in Alexandria. She is credited with writing commentaries on Diophantus's Arithmetica, a foundational work in algebra, Apollonius of Perga's Conics, on conic sections, and possibly on Ptolemy's astronomical works. She is also said to have assisted her father in revising Ptolemy's Almagest and Euclid's Elements. Hypatia never married, and is consistently portrayed as having dedicated her life to learning and teaching. The Suda, a 10th century Byzantine encyclopedia, explicitly mentions her celibacy, framing it as a conscious choice in favor of her intellectual pursuits. Her contemporary, the historian Socrates Scholasticus, wrote of her immense learning, her eloquence, and her respected public role, advising city magistrates. Her life exemplifies the possibility of a woman achieving great intellectual stature in the ancient world, and her decision to remain unmarried appears to have been integral to her ability to pursue this path with such singular devotion. Her work involved not just preserving and explaining earlier knowledge, but engaging critically with it. For example, she is said to have constructed scientific instruments like astrolabes, used to measure the positions of stars and planets, and hydrometers, used to measure the density of liquids. Hypatia's tragic death at the hands of a Christian mob in 415 Common Era, a result of political and religious tensions in Alexandria, cut short a brilliant career. Her story highlights the profound contributions that could be made by an individual whose life was structured around an unwavering commitment to intellectual endeavor. While Hypatia is a prominent example, the theme of the singularly focused scholar appears in other contexts. consider the lives of some of the great natural philosophers and mathematicians, whose personal details are scant but whose monumental works speak of lifetimes of absorbed study. Thales of Miletus, often considered the first philosopher in the Greek tradition, around 624–546 before Common Era, is credited with breakthroughs in geometry and early attempts to explain natural phenomena without recourse to mythology. Stories about him, such as his falling into a well while stargazing, or his prediction of a solar eclipse, paint a picture of a mind deeply engrossed in observation and thought. Whether he married or not is debated by ancient sources, with some saying he did and had a son, others that he remained single, urging others to marry but not doing so himself, or adopting his nephew. Regardless of the specifics, his intellectual output, including reportedly bringing Egyptian geometry to Greece, suggests a life where inquiry was paramount. Similarly, figures like Diogenes the Cynic, approximately 412–323 before Common Era, while not a scientist in the modern sense, chose a life of extreme asceticism and public philosophical performance to critique societal norms and advocate for a life lived in accordance with nature. His radical rejection of material possessions and conventional social ties, including marriage, was central to his philosophical practice. This deliberate choice to live an unencumbered, unconventional life allowed him the freedom to pursue his philosophical mission with uncompromising dedication. While his contributions were ethical and social rather than directly scientific in terms of natural science, his emphasis on reason, self-sufficiency, and living authentically represents a form of intellectual and personal dedication that set him apart. The unwavering focus these individuals brought to their intellectual or philosophical callings, often facilitated by lives less constrained by typical domestic structures, allowed them to make contributions that echoed through centuries. Their stories are a testament to the power of singular, passionate dedication.